In the mountains of central Japan, engineers found something they did not expect: a stretch of solid rock that refused to behave like rock. It shifted. It cracked in patterns nobody could predict. In the 1960s, when construction crews began cutting through the Japanese Alps to build a new highway, workers noticed strange sounds coming from deep inside the tunnels. Low groans, sudden shifts in pressure. Some crews refused to continue without new safety checks. Officials pressed forward anyway. Japan needed this road. Villages on the western side of the mountains were nearly cut off from the rest of the country, reachable only by narrow passes that closed for months during winter. A direct route through the mountain could change everything, but the deeper crews dug, the more the mountain seemed to resist. Underground rivers appeared where map showed none. Rock formations shifted overnight, undoing days of work. One engineer later admitted the mountain behaved like it was alive. The project would take years longer than planned, cost far more than expected, and reveal something about Japan's landscape that few outside the construction crews ever knew. This is the story of why Japan built a highway through a mountain that seemed determined to stop them. The mountain in question was part of the Japanese Alps, cutting straight through Nagano Prefecture. For centuries, it stood as a natural wall. Villages on one side rarely interacted with towns on the other, separated by peaks that made travel dangerous even in good weather. By the 1950s, Japan was rebuilding fast after the war. New roads connected cities. New rail lines reached deep into the countryside. But this mountain remained untouched, considered too unstable, too unpredictable to tunnel through safely. Local officials pushed anyway. Farmers on the western slopes were losing access to markets. Hospitals were hours away during snow season. One town leader in Nagano warned that without a new route, entire communities risked being abandoned within a generation. In 1958, the government approved a survey team to study the mountain. What they found puzzled even experienced geologists. Instead of solid, uniform rock, the mountain contained pockets of loose sediment buried deep beneath the surface. Some layers were soft, others hard as steel. There was no clear pattern to where one ended and the other began. A senior surveyor described the readings as inconsistent in a way we hadn't seen before. Construction planning slowed. Engineers debated whether tunneling was even possible without risking collapse. Still, pressure from local leaders continued. By 1962, crews broke ground on what would become one of Japan's most difficult infrastructure projects. Within the first few months, workers hit something unexpected. Water. Not a small leak. Not a minor seep. A steady, rising flow with no clear source, filling parts of the tunnel faster than pumps could remove it. Crews scrambled to understand where the water was coming from. There was no river marked on any survey map near that section of the mountain. No lake. No known aquifer. Yet the flow kept rising, forcing workers to evacuate the tunnel section twice within a single month. One foreman described the moment water first surged through a drilling shaft. It came out like the mountain was bleeding, he said. Engineers brought in geologists from Tokyo to investigate. Their instruments picked up something strange. Pressure readings deep inside the rock were higher than anywhere else measured in the region, far higher than normal groundwater levels should allow. Some suspected an underground spring. Others thought a fault line had been disturbed by the drilling itself. A senior geologist noted that the water carried unusual mineral traces, unlike anything found in nearby rivers or wells. It wasn't ordinary rainwater seepage. It was coming from somewhere deeper. Local elders, when asked, mentioned old stories about the mountain holding water inside it, passed down for generations but never taken seriously by outsiders. Workers began to grow uneasy. 2 crew members quit within the same week, citing safety concerns officials dismissed as overcaution. Meanwhile, cracks began appearing along nearby hillside roads, miles from the tunnel entrance. Local residents reported minor tremors, faint but frequent, something the region had never experienced before construction began. Officials insisted the 2 events were unrelated, but engineers on site were no longer certain, because if the water inside the mountain was connected to something larger, stopping the tunnel might no longer be an option. The mountain, it seemed, held more secrets than anyone had prepared for. By 1963, the project had stalled twice. Each time, officials in Tokyo demanded answers before allowing work to resume. A special investigation team was sent to examine the tunnel site directly, this time with equipment capable of scanning deeper into the rock than before. What they found changed the entire understanding of the mountain. Beneath the surface layers, the mountain wasn't solid at all in several key zones. It was riddled with fractures, some running for hundreds of meters, filled with pressurized water trapped for what geologists estimated to be thousands of years. One researcher called it an underground reservoir nobody knew existed. The tunnel crew hadn't just hit a leak. They had punctured a natural pressure system that had been sealed inside the mountain since long before recorded history. Removing that pressure the wrong way could trigger a much larger collapse. Engineers realized the earlier tremors were not unrelated after all. They were signs the mountain was adjusting to the disturbance, however small. A structural specialist flown in from Osaka warned that continued drilling without addressing the water pressure could destabilize the entire slope above the construction zone. That slope sat directly above a section of national rail line. The stakes had changed completely. This was no longer just a stalled construction project. It was now a potential risk to a transportation route used by thousands of people every day. Officials called an emergency meeting. Some pushed to abandon the tunnel entirely and reroute the highway elsewhere, adding years and significant cost. Others believed a solution existed if the water could be controlled rather than simply removed. Nobody at that meeting realized the answer would come from an unexpected source, something learned decades earlier from a very different kind of disaster. The answer came from a mining engineer who had spent years working coal seams in Kyushu, far from the mountains of Nagano. He had seen pressurized water pockets before, though never at this scale. His method was simple in theory, but demanding in execution. Instead of draining the water quickly, crews would relieve pressure gradually, drilling small pilot holes ahead of the main tunnel to let water escape in a controlled path before the larger excavation reached it. It meant slower progress. It meant more caution than the original schedule allowed. But it also meant avoiding a sudden pressure release that could collapse the slope above. Officials approved the method with reluctance, aware that any mistake now carried far higher consequences than before. Work resumed in early 1964, this time with hydraulic engineers stationed permanently on site. Pilot holes were drilled meters ahead of each blast, monitored constantly for pressure changes. Progress was slow, sometimes only a few meters a week. Workers described the process as tense, almost delicate, unlike anything they had done before. One engineer said the team treated the mountain like a patient during surgery, not a wall to break through. Then, months into the new method, drilling revealed something unexpected again. Beneath one of the fracture zones, crews found evidence of an old rock slide, long buried, that had shifted the mountain's internal structure centuries earlier. It explained the uneven pressure readings from the very beginning. The mountain hadn't just been holding water. It had been slowly healing itself from a disaster that predated any modern record of the region, one that had quietly shaped everything engineers were now fighting to work around. With the ancient rock slide finally understood, engineers adjusted their approach one last time. Instead of tunneling straight through the unstable zone, they redesigned the route slightly, curving around the weakest section of fractured rock. It added months to an already delayed project, but it avoided the most dangerous ground entirely. By 1966, after nearly 4 years of setbacks, the tunnel broke through to the other side. Workers who had spent years underground described the moment as strangely quiet, almost anticlimactic after everything the mountain had put them through. One engineer later said, "We didn't defeat the mountain, we learned to work with it." The highway opened to the public in 1967, connecting towns that had been isolated for generations. Travel time between the two sides of the mountain dropped from several hours to under 30 minutes. Farmers gained direct access to city markets. Hospitals became reachable within minutes instead of half a day. But engineers also left behind something unusual: permanent monitoring stations inside the tunnel, tracking water pressure and rock movement long after construction ended. Decades later, those stations are still active, part of routine maintenance most drivers passing through never notice. The data they collected became a reference point for future tunnel projects across Japan, especially in regions with similarly unstable geology. What began as a simple infrastructure decision became one of the country's most valuable lessons in engineering around, rather than against, unpredictable terrain. Today, thousands of vehicles pass through that mountain every day, unaware of the pressurized water, the ancient rock slide, and the years of struggle buried beneath the road they're driving on. If you enjoyed uncovering this hidden piece of engineering history, subscribe for more true stories where human ambition collided with the unpredictable forces of nature.